Imagine this. It's 1984. A little-known French entrepreneur just made a bold move. He bought a crumbling textile empire on the brink of collapse. Hidden within this failing giant was one diamond, Christian Dior, the world's most iconic couture house, wrapped in debt and disarray. And yet, this man, Bernard Arnault, saw what no one else did. He didn't just save Dior. He turned it into the cornerstone of what would become the largest luxury empire the world has ever seen. Today, his family controls LVMH, a powerhouse behind Louis Vuitton, Dior, Tiffany, Givenchy, Fendi, and more.
Bernard Arnault is set to
billionaires.
For more than 40 years, Bernard Arnault.
Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior.
The world's wealthiest man, Bernard.
But the story of how this dynasty came to dominate global fashion doesn't begin in Paris catwalks or champagne towers. It starts far earlier, in the gray skies of Roubaix, in a modest construction materials firm with a boy who loved math, design, and the quiet hum of strategy. This is not just a story of wealth. It's about vision, power, control, and a meticulously crafted dynasty where every child is a future CEO and every brand is a war trophy. Let's start at the very beginning. Bernard Arnault was born on March 5, 1949, in Roubaix, a grimy industrial town in northern France known for textiles and hard winters. From the outside, it might seem an unlikely birthplace for the architect of global luxury, but behind the soot-streaked streets was a family with quiet ambition. His father, Jean Arnault, owned Ferré Savinel, a civil engineering company dealing in construction materials. Jean wasn't a tycoon, but he was practical, diligent, and respected in local business circles. His mother, Marie-Joseph, had a sharper eye, especially for refinement. She played the piano, loved fashion, and idolized Christian Dior. From her, Bernard would inherit not just a taste for elegance, but a long-term obsession with timeless brands. The young Bernard attended Lycée Maxence van der Meersch, a local school, and showed early talent in mathematics and classical studies. While many of his classmates focused on Roubaix's declining industries, Bernard was always looking elsewhere, asking questions beyond the classroom. Dinner table conversations weren't about gossip or sport. They were about deals, logistics, and market movements. Jean Arnault encouraged discipline and precision in thought, but Bernard saw beyond his father's modest empire. He understood the potential of combining solid business with aesthetic value, of turning raw material into desire. Roubaix may have been working class, but it offered something invaluable: contrast. A boy born into industry could begin to dream of luxury. By his early teens, Bernard Arnault's two passions had already taken root: mathematics and beauty. Not in the traditional artistic sense, but in the form of clean, structured elegance. This was a boy who saw symmetry in skyscrapers and discipline in design. At Lycée Faidherbe in Lille, Bernard began to stand out, not for flamboyance, but for the sheer precision of his mind. Teachers noted his relentless focus, especially in math and physics, but he wasn't a cold technician. He loved piano music, especially Chopin, and idolized the architecture of Paris, often sketching designs in his notebooks. While his peers talked about becoming engineers or factory managers, Bernard was quietly mapping systems, figuring out what made people desire, what made them remember, what made a name eternal. At just 15, he wrote an essay on the future of brands in a changing France. His teachers dismissed it as too abstract. They didn't see the empire being imagined behind his eyes. Bernard also started working part-time in his father's firm during school breaks. Instead of simply delivering cement orders, he studied cost structures, logistics, and client negotiations. His father, Jean, began to notice something unsettling. Bernard wasn't interested in preserving the business, he wanted to transform it. This was the early blueprint of what would later become his modus operandi: identify weakness, restructure, refine, dominate. In 1966, Bernard Arnault passed the entrance exam for École Polytechnique, France's most prestigious engineering school. Admission alone was proof of elite intellect, but Bernard wasn't just there to master equations. He was refining his thinking, building a mental model for industrial reinvention. His time at Polytechnique shaped him profoundly. He learned systems theory, management science, and statistical modeling. He read Adam Smith and Claude Lévi-Strauss, absorbing both capitalist theory and cultural anthropology. The idea that luxury is language, that brands speak a code, began to crystallize. Upon graduating in 1971, Bernard joined Ferret Savinel, the family firm, full-time. But unlike his father, he didn't romanticize the construction industry. Concrete was necessary, but not aspirational. He quickly pushed to pivot the company into real estate development, selling off its industrial divisions. His pitch was simple. France was modernizing, and property was the future. By 1976, he convinced Jean Arnault to rebrand the company as Farinel and expand aggressively into residential development along the French Riviera. While the French elite lounged in Cannes, Bernard was building the villas they'd rent and buy. He wasn't interested in temporary success. He wanted assets, permanence, a brand that people whispered about in Monte Carlo. At just 27, he had already restructured his father's company, exited a declining sector, and carved his first foothold in high-end commerce. It wasn't Dior, not yet, but it was the first brushstroke on a luxury canvas. In 1971, Bernard Arnault's father, Jean, passed away. At just 22, Bernard inherited control of the family business. Many expected him to simply preserve it, to be a steward rather than a strategist. But Arnault wasn't interested in legacy. He was interested in leverage. By now, Farinel was profitable, but uninspiring. Property development had served its purpose. It trained Bernard in market cycles, scale, and silent power plays. But it wasn't enough. France in the early 1980s was facing socialist policies and heavy taxation under President François Mitterrand. Entrepreneurs were fleeing. Capital was stagnant. Bernard, true to form, adapted. He moved to the United States in 1981 with his wife and children, observing how American capitalism encouraged risk, ambition, and consumer culture. In the States, he learned one thing that would define his empire-building playbook. Brand is everything. He returned to France in 1984, not as a landlord, but as a predator on the hunt. And his target was bold: the bankrupt Boussac Saint Frère conglomerate. It was a mess of textile factories, retail stores, and debt. But buried inside was the diamond he had dreamt of since childhood: Christian Dior. Arnault convinced the French government to let him acquire Boussac for just 1 franc. Yes, 1 symbolic franc, with the promise to rescue jobs. But behind closed doors, he planned a complete restructuring. He sold off everything except Dior and Le Bon Marché, the iconic department store. This wasn't charity, it was chess. In less than 2 years, he turned a bankrupt relic into a profitable jewel. He didn't just rescue Dior, he captured it. And in doing so, he set the stage for something no one had yet attempted: the creation of a luxury empire. When Bernard Arnault acquired the decaying Boussac Group in 1984, few could imagine the precision of what would follow. He didn't walk into Dior as a fashion lover. He walked in as a systems engineer with a taste for prestige. The Boussac Group was overextended, textile mills hemorrhaging money, obsolete factories, too many brands with no direction. But Arnault had one singular focus: Dior. That was the crown jewel, and everything else was excess baggage. So, he began what would become his signature move: surgical consolidation. He sold off the money-losing divisions with military speed. 5 businesses gone in less than 18 months. Thousands of jobs were cut. Factories closed. Critics howled. The French press dubbed him the Wolf in Cashmere. But Bernard was unmoved. He believed that to revive Dior, he had to amputate the rest. Inside Dior, he was relentless. He revamped the leadership, redesigned the perfume strategy, and invested in international expansion. He didn't just want the French elite. He wanted American department stores, Japanese runways, and Middle Eastern luxury malls. Within 3 years, Dior went from a national relic to an international headline.
Dior Couture, the iconic.
Profits soared. And suddenly, the man who was virtually unknown outside Paris was now the most talked about name in European business circles. This wasn't just a company turnaround. It was a philosophical statement. Luxury is scalable. and Bernard Arnault was going to be its architect. After Dior, Bernard Arnault didn't slow down, he scaled up. In 1987, the French luxury landscape was fragmented but valuable. Three iconic houses, Louis Vuitton, Moët and Chandon, and Hennessy, were in talks to merge. The idea was simple: combine fashion, champagne, and cognac under one group, LVMH. Arnault wasn't involved at first, but he saw an opportunity. He bought a stake quietly, then began accumulating more, methodically, like a chess grandmaster encircling the king. When tensions emerged between executives Alain Chevalier and Henri Racamier, Arnault moved in. He positioned himself as the peacemaker, offering solutions, support, and stability. But behind the scenes, he was rallying shareholders, courting banks, and aligning votes. In just 2 years, he ousted both original founders and took control of the entire group. It was a hostile takeover wrapped in polite handshakes. Critics called it ruthless. Arnault called it strategic clarity. He believed luxury should be run like an engineering firm: tight margins, zero waste, and complete control. From this moment on, Bernard Arnault stopped being a businessman. He became the general of French luxury. By 1989, he had majority control of LVMH and began molding it into his vision. A decentralized group of brands, each with its own identity, but united by one core principle: excellence or exit. To rivals, he was cold and calculating. To investors, he was genius. And to the public, he was quickly becoming one of the most powerful, mysterious figures in global commerce. By the early 1990s, Bernard Arnault had done what no one else dared. He had merged three of France's most iconic luxury brands into a single holding company. But LVMH was not just a merger, it was a revolution in luxury architecture. Moët and Chandon had prestige, Hennessy had tradition, and Louis Vuitton had style. Arnault realized that the power wasn't just in the products, it was in the stories. Each maison carried decades, sometimes centuries, of heritage. That was the asset. And Arnault's vision was to scale history without losing soul. He implemented a decentralized structure that baffled outsiders. Each brand had its own CEO, creative director, and operational freedom. Yet all answered to the financial pulse and strategic mandates of LVMH. Think of it as a federation of kings, with one emperor. This structure created agility. While conglomerates like Procter & Gamble centralized operations, Arnault let his maisons compete, even internally. Dior and Louis Vuitton often fought for the same markets. Arnault welcomed it. Internal tension bred external excellence. During this time, LVMH also expanded into watches and jewelry, acquiring Tag Heuer and introducing new product lines like accessories, cosmetics, and high-end retail. The aim? Own the entire luxury lifestyle vertical. Under his leadership, LVMH wasn't just a business, it was becoming a universe. By the mid-1990s, Bernard Arnault had already assembled a pantheon of prestigious names. But what made LVMH unique wasn't just its portfolio, it was its philosophy. Arnault introduced a mantra to every maison under his wing: think like an owner. He didn't want employees, he wanted guardians. Whether it was a store manager in Tokyo or a creative director in Paris, everyone was expected to act as if the brand's legacy depended on their decisions. But here's the paradox: Arnault ruled with absolute authority. LVMH wasn't a democracy, it was a military-grade meritocracy. Underperformers were quickly removed. Creative directors were expected to generate both cultural buzz and commercial returns. Designers like John Galliano, Marc Jacobs, and later Virgil Abloh were brought in, not just to make fashion, but to make headlines. Each brand under LVMH operated as a separate maison, autonomous yet answerable. There was no forced synergy. Arnault believed that Dior should never be diluted by Louis Vuitton, and vice versa. Instead of creating a monolithic brand, he created a constellation, each star burning in its own orbit, with the LVMH sun at the center. Internally, LVMH was ruthless in performance tracking: weekly financial updates, monthly market audits, quarterly projections. This wasn't artistic chaos, it was elegant efficiency. And while luxury brands elsewhere struggled with bureaucracy or family squabbles, LVMH ran like a war machine. Why? Because Arnault wasn't afraid to fire friends or cut legacy teams. To him, loyalty was earned quarterly. This cultural rigidity, blended with creative freedom, allowed LVMH to scale without losing identity. That's the paradox of Arnault's genius. He didn't crush creativity, he contained it, sharpened it, monetized it. In 1988, Bernard Arnault listed LVMH on the Paris Stock Exchange. It was a bold move. Luxury had always been associated with exclusivity, discreet, private, insulated. Going public meant exposing the empire to the scrutiny of shareholders, analysts, and regulators. But Arnault saw something different: capital as a weapon. The IPO provided LVMH with the firepower to grow aggressively. With a public valuation, he could raise debt cheaply, attract institutional investors, and launch new brand acquisitions. But he was careful. Arnault never ceded control. Using a sophisticated web of holding companies, Arnault ensured that the Arnault family would always retain majority voting power, even as LVMH's market cap exploded. It was a masterclass in governance, democracy on paper, monarchy in practice. The boardroom itself was a balancing act. Arnault surrounded himself with financiers, legal experts, and loyal family members. But he also welcomed external talent, so long as they aligned with his vision. Disagreements were tolerated, dissent wasn't. In board meetings, he was known for asking questions that cut straight to core issues. Is this profitable? Is this scalable? Will this brand survive 50 years? If a plan couldn't withstand those questions, it didn't move forward. At a time when many French conglomerates were struggling with overregulation and shareholder activism, LVMH ran lean and tight. Arnault's control structure gave him agility and long-term vision, something quarterly-obsessed corporations often lack. This fusion of tight governance and operational independence became a model studied in business schools from Harvard to INSEAD, and by the end of the 1990s, LVMH had become the most valuable luxury company in the world. If Dior was the spark, then the late 90s and 2000s were the wildfire. Bernard Arnault didn't just want a luxury group, he wanted the luxury galaxy, and to build it, he went shopping. First came Céline in 1996, a brand with roots in minimalism and modern femininity. Arnault saw its potential in Asia and invested heavily in store design and runway revamps. Then Fendi in 2001, an Italian powerhouse struggling under family disputes. Arnault stepped in, took a majority stake, and brought stability. Karl Lagerfeld was retained as creative head, ensuring continuity. Sales surged within 5 years. In 2011, LVMH acquired Bulgari, the iconic Roman jeweler. This was no ordinary deal. It was a share swap, where the Bulgari family received LVMH stock, making them key shareholders. It was Arnault's way of signaling trust, while also tightening his grip on high jewelry. But the crown jewel? That came in 2020, when LVMH finalized the acquisition of Tiffany & Company for $15.8 billion. It was the largest deal in luxury history. Negotiations were brutal. The pandemic delayed the closing. Arnault even walked away once, forcing Tiffany to lower its asking price. Then he returned and sealed the deal. By this point, LVMH didn't just own brands. It defined desire across fashion, cosmetics, jewelry, and spirits. And Bernard Arnault became known not just as a businessman, but as the curator of global taste. He didn't build brands. He bought them, refined them, and turned them into legends. While many saw luxury as slow to adapt, Bernard Arnault saw opportunity in tech lag, and by the 2000s, he was already preparing for the digital wave. He wasn't impressed by e-commerce in its early days. He once said luxury cannot be bought like a book. But that didn't mean he ignored it. Instead, he partnered with tech-forward platforms while controlling the experience. Louis Vuitton's online store was launched with cinematic visuals, concierge support, and zero discounting. LVMH also quietly began investing in data science teams, ECRM, and AI-driven personalization. Every click, purchase, and return was studied, not to chase volume, but to understand affluent behavior. Then came China. Arnault recognized early that China would be the future of luxury, not because of population size, but because of cultural appetite. Chinese consumers didn't just want labels, they wanted heritage, status, and connection. By 2010, LVMH had over 70 stores in mainland China, including mega flagships in Beijing and Shanghai. Arnault even hired Mandarin-speaking executives and pushed campaigns during Chinese New Year before most of his rivals caught on. In emerging markets like India, Brazil, and Southeast Asia, LVMH used a test-and-scale approach. Small boutique launches followed by flagship expansions if demand proved sustainable. Through it all, the digital footprint of LVMH grew. Instagram campaigns, YouTube fashion shows, NFTs, and even gaming collabs. Arnault didn't always lead the trend, but he never missed the pivot. In a world where attention is the new currency, LVMH figured out how to make desire go viral without looking desperate. By 2019, Bernard Arnault had conquered nearly every corner of the luxury world, except one, high-end American jewelry. That missing piece? Tiffany & Company, the iconic New York brand synonymous with romance, silver, and that unmistakable robin egg blue. Founded in 1837, Tiffany had global recognition, but its financials were fading. Revenues had slowed, and millennials were drifting toward niche jewelry names. To Arnault, this wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. In October 2019, LVMH offered to buy Tiffany for $16.2 billion, its largest acquisition ever. The deal was praised as a bold marriage between Parisian power and American elegance. But then, just months later, the world changed. COVID-19 shut down stores, froze supply chains, and clouded Tiffany's valuation. Arnault did what few CEOs had the nerve to do. He pulled out, publicly citing uncertainty, but privately maneuvering to renegotiate. The message was clear. LVMH pays premium prices, but not for slipping margins. Tensions escalated. Lawsuits flew back and forth. Analysts speculated the deal was dead. But in November 2020, just before trial, Arnault returned with a reduced offer of $15.8 billion. Tiffany agreed. The merger was finalized in January 2021. And with it, LVMH didn't just gain a brand, it gained America's jewelry crown. Tiffany was immediately revamped. New creative director, fresh campaigns, and a bold statement, "Not your mother's Tiffany." Controversial, yes, but effective. Sales rebounded. Younger audiences took notice. The brand felt reborn. The acquisition was more than a deal. It was a masterclass in corporate timing, negotiation psychology, and brand resuscitation. Once again, Bernard Arnault had taken a sleeping beauty and turned her into a queen. If there is one thing Bernard Arnault treasures as much as brands, it's art. Not just as a collector, but as a cultural architect. In 2006, he announced plans to build a museum unlike anything France had seen before, the Louis Vuitton Foundation. Designed by Frank Gehry, the avant-garde American architect behind the Guggenheim Bilbao, the building would resemble a glass sailboat floating in the Bois de Boulogne, just outside Paris. Critics scoffed. The design was unorthodox, the location unusual, and the cost, estimated at over 780 million euros, seemed excessive. But to Arnault, this wasn't vanity. It was vision. Opened in 2014, the Louis Vuitton Foundation is now considered one of the greatest private art museums in the world. It houses works by Jean-Michel Basquiat, Ellsworth Kelly, Rothko, Giacometti, and more. But beyond that, it offers rotating exhibitions in partnership with major institutions, from MoMA to the Hermitage. It's also a subtle branding tool. Every visitor is exposed to LVMH's aesthetic, sophistication, innovation, permanence. Arnault once said, "Luxury is about emotion, and art is emotion distilled." For him, this foundation isn't just a museum, it's a philosophical thesis. LVMH doesn't just sell handbags or champagne, it curates culture. He also understands legacy. Museums outlive brands. By attaching LVMH to a center of artistic excellence, he ensures that long after the market fluctuates, his name will remain anchored in European cultural memory. Bernard Arnault doesn't speak often about philanthropy, but when he does give, it's strategic, symbolic, and significant. In April 2019, the world watched in horror as the Notre Dame Cathedral burned. France's spiritual and architectural heart was in flames. Within 24 hours, the Arnault family pledged 200 million euros toward its restoration, the largest private donation made. Critics called it opportunistic. Arnault didn't respond. He didn't need to. His message was clear: LVMH preserves France. Beyond monuments, the Arnault Foundation also funds education, particularly in arts, science, and business. Partnerships with HEC Paris and École Polytechnique have created scholarships for underprivileged students, aimed at nurturing the next generation of cultural and commercial leaders. In fashion, LVMH launched its Prize for Young Designers, offering funding and mentorship to emerging global talent. This isn't just generosity, it's pipeline creation. By supporting young visionaries, LVMH stays close to innovation without losing control of its core identity. There's also a philanthropic footprint in sustainability. The Life 360 program, LVMH Initiatives for the Environment, pledges carbon reduction, regenerative agriculture, and eco-design. Whether this is altruism or branding is up for debate, but the impact is real. To Arnault, giving is not about profile building, it's about shaping the environment in which his empire operates. Cathedrals, campuses, creativity, these are the ecosystems that luxury needs to survive, and Arnault knows that better than anyone. Luxury isn't confined to fashion or fragrance, and Bernard Arnault knows this better than anyone. In the mid-2000s, LVMH began investing in hospitality and real estate, launching the Cheval Blanc hotel brand. These weren't ordinary hotels. Think palaces in Courchevel, Saint-Tropez, and the Maldives, each one a physical manifestation of the LVMH aesthetic. Arnault understood that for the ultra-rich, luxury is about immersion, not just products. You don't just buy Louis Vuitton luggage, you arrive at a Louis Vuitton-designed resort. Meanwhile, the group also took stakes in cultural real estate, most notably Le Samaritain, a historic Parisian department store. After a 15-year renovation, it reopened in 2021 as a mixed-use luxury complex. It blended heritage architecture with modern retail, another hallmark of the Arnault style: honor the past, profit in the present. But perhaps more interestingly, LVMH quietly entered media. Arnault acquired stakes in Le Parisien, Les Echos, and the French edition of the Financial Times. Why? Influence. Owning newspapers isn't profitable, but it offers cultural leverage. It ensures narratives are shaped with care. It provides a voice when criticism surfaces, and in the subtle, soft power game that luxury plays, image is everything. Bernard Arnault isn't just building a company, he's crafting a dynasty. And like all dynasties, succession isn't left to chance. Over the last 3 decades, Arnault has quietly, but methodically, prepared his children to take over LVMH. Each of his 5 children has been assigned a strategic role, not as figureheads, but as battle-tested executives. Delphine Arnault, the eldest daughter, began her career at McKinsey before joining LVMH. Today, she's the CEO of Christian Dior Couture, one of the group's most important brands. Insiders describe her as sharp, precise, and as focused as her father. Then there's Antoine Arnault, once seen as the heir apparent. He ran communications for Louis Vuitton and later became CEO of Berluti. Today, he also oversees LVMH's image and leads the family's holding company, Groupe Arnault. Alexandre, Frédéric, and Jean, Arnault's sons from his second marriage, are equally involved. Alexandre ran Moët and joined Tiffany & Company as Executive Vice President of Product and Communications. Frédéric was appointed CEO of Tag Heuer in his 20s and led a digital transformation there. Jean, the youngest, is being groomed in LVMH's watch division. What's remarkable isn't that the Arnault children have roles, it's that they perform. Results are expected, performance is tracked, and Bernard himself remains the ultimate evaluator. Unlike other family empires that fade into squabbles or apathy, the Arnault lineage appears synchronized and disciplined. Family dinners, according to insiders, are part love, part board meeting. This is not nepotism. It's strategic inheritance, grooming not just successors, but stakeholders who share the vision, the rigor, and the obsession for excellence. Bernard Arnault is not loud. He rarely gives interviews. He doesn't dominate headlines. But make no mistake, he controls rooms with silence. Insiders describe him as surgical. He listens more than he speaks. When he does speak, his words are precise, often phrased as questions that cut straight to the weakness of an idea. What's the margin? Why should we care? Will this be relevant in 20 years? Arnault doesn't micromanage, but he doesn't abdicate. Every major creative hire, from Marc Jacobs to Virgil Abloh, had his approval. Every acquisition, from Bulgari to Tiffany, was personally negotiated. His boardroom style blends engineering logic with artistic intuition. He's known to surprise designers by showing up at fittings unannounced, asking for tweaks, and then disappearing. He doesn't tell you what to do. He makes you want to impress him. One executive once said, "Working under Bernard is like being in an elite military unit. The pressure is immense, but you become sharper than you ever thought possible." But there's another side, patience. Arnault plays the long game. He'll wait years before making a move. He'll walk away from a deal and circle back when the timing is perfect. He isn't just a businessman, he's a strategist, always thinking 2 decades ahead. This mindset isn't about ego, it's about permanence. Arnault wants LVMH to be as relevant in 2100 as it is in 2025. Despite being the world's richest man at times, Bernard Arnault lives far from the spotlight. He avoids the billionaire yacht club scene. He rarely attends celebrity galas, and his personal life is fiercely private. Arnault has been married twice and has 5 children, all actively involved in his business empire. He currently resides in Paris, with multiple properties across Europe, including a mansion in Bordeaux and a ski chalet in Courchevel. He's a classically trained pianist and counts Chopin and Schumann among his favorites. In many ways, his approach to business mirrors classical music, structured, nuanced, layered. While he rarely displays public emotion, he is deeply loyal to a close circle of advisors and family members. Longtime colleagues describe him as cold at first but warm over time, once you've proven yourself. He's also a collector of art, of brands, of influence. From Basquiat to Monet, Arnault's private art collection is rumored to be worth over $1 billion. But unlike others, he doesn't flaunt it. Most of it is stored or displayed subtly at the Louis Vuitton Foundation. Even his hobbies are strategic. He plays tennis, measured, competitive, high pressure. He sails, another solitary sport where precision and planning win over flash and spontaneity. For Arnault, the personal and professional are inseparable. Every decision, every alliance, every interest must align with his broader mission: build forever, not just for today. In 2022, Bernard Arnault briefly surpassed Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to become the richest man on Earth, a staggering 200+ billion fortune. But unlike the tech moguls, Arnault's wealth was built on silk, perfume, and champagne. It shocked the world. How could a man selling handbags and cognac outpace rockets and electric cars? The answer: timing, trust, and timelessness. While tech stocks soared and crashed, LVMH remained stable. Luxury proved resilient, even during crises. When the world shut down in 2020, high-net-worth individuals kept spending, and Arnault's empire was waiting. By 2023, LVMH's valuation passed $500 billion, and Arnault's net worth climbed with it. But he didn't celebrate. No Twitter posts, no crypto memes, just another board meeting, another acquisition, another silent expansion. For Arnault, wealth isn't the goal. Control is. He continues to tighten his grip on LVMH through Group Arnault, ensuring the family remains in charge, regardless of how many shares the public owns. In a world obsessed with disruption, Arnault has proven that discipline, discretion, and design can still win. He isn't loud, he isn't flashy, but he is, without question, the most powerful man in luxury, and possibly the world. In a time when luxury is often criticized for waste and overconsumption, LVMH is pushing a bold agenda. Life 360. Launched in 2021, Life LVMH Initiatives for the Environment 360 outlines targets for sustainable materials, carbon neutrality, and biodiversity protection across all 75 brands. From recycled fabrics at Stella McCartney to energy-efficient stores at Louis Vuitton, the push is real and monitored. Some might argue that this is reactive, a nod to ESG trends and regulatory pressures, but others see it as forward-looking strategy. LVMH wants to future-proof its reputation. The initiative includes eco-design standards for all products by 2026, full traceability of materials, regenerative agriculture partnerships, a focus on circular economy practices, including repair and resale services. Arnault, who once downplayed sustainability as incompatible with luxury, has now redefined it. True luxury is sustainable by definition, he recently said. The message is subtle but strong. LVMH doesn't follow the trend. It sets the standard. This shift ensures that younger, climate-conscious consumers continue to see LVMH brands as desirable, not just for their status, but for their values. And with heirs like Frederick and Alexandra pushing digital sustainability models, the future looks tightly integrated. Today, the name Arnault is more than a surname. It's a symbol of quiet power, ruthless efficiency, refined dominance, a family that controls champagne in Reims, diamonds in New York, perfume in Grasse, fashion in Paris, and the desires of millions around the world. Bernard Arnault did not invent luxury, but he turned it into a business model, a language, an empire. And what's more impressive than his personal fortune is how he's made the world fall in love with what he owns. You don't just want a bag, you want a Vuitton. You don't just sip champagne, you celebrate with Dom Pérignon. This is the final act of Bernard Arnault's genius, crafting a legacy so vast, so embedded, that most people don't even know they're part of it. The dynasty is already in motion. His children are positioned. His empire is structured. And whether or not he remains the richest man alive, one thing is certain. The Arnault name is built to last.